G'day everyone and welcome back to this Share Cafe Hidden Gems webinar and what is West East Coast of Australia. Now, the weather has brought with us a casualty today. Unfortunately, Expon have been a late withdrawal as their founder and managing director is flooded in Queensland without internet connection. So apologies for Expon's late withdrawal, but stay tuned as we discuss smart lockers, logistics, and dermatology. Always very interesting. Don't forget to ask questions in the box provided. As you see, if you're a regular, you can see that the CEOs do answer your questions. If you're new to this event, don't be afraid to answer or to ask questions. Okay, we're going to make an immediate start. First up, we have TZ Limited, ASX code TZL, market cap around 22 million, 1 year return of minus 16%. The company has successfully commercialised proprietary locking technology in the smart locker and data cabinet security markets. We welcome the company back. We have with us the new CEO, Mario Vecchio. Mario, over to you.
Thank you very much. And I think speak for yourself, Tim, on weather. I'm here in Melbourne and it's a beautiful sunny day and we haven't had any rain for about 3 weeks. So Melbourne is obviously the sunshine state at the moment. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time. What I'd like to do is give everyone a quick summary of TZ and a little bit of an update on what our last quarter looked like. I've been in the role for coming on to 5 months now. So let's get started. Next slide, please. So for those of you who don't know us, what we are is we're an engineering software company around access and control of physical spaces. And we are more of an asset management company and a software logistics company than what people really understand. But I'll take you through that today. Next slide, please. Ultimately, we have software and we have smart locks. Our locks are patented around the world. We've got, we're very well known around the world for our locking technology and how that is positioned against all of our competitors. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we open and close things and we allow that to be done in a highly intelligent way. Next slide, please. TZ have the bluest of blue chip customers and it's a testament to the technology. You can see some of those there: Apple, Microsoft, Google, Adidas, others, Netflix, Starbucks, just to name a handful, and I can keep going on and on. World Bank, NATO, which is, we're pretty busy with them right at the moment, as you can understand, in Europe. So we really do have the bluest of blue chip customers, as I say, which is a testament to what the technology does and how it competes on a world stage. It's also important to understand that 60% of our revenue comes from the US. So we are truly a global software company with locations scattered around the world in the US, Europe, Africa, obviously Australia, in Asia, and in India. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to quickly take you through a journey of why people do what they do with us. This is an example of WestTrac, and who are a large Caterpillar dealer, for those of you who don't know. And basically, it's a click and collect service. It's a logistics service. It's an asset management service. And really what we did with WestTrac, and this is actually being rolled out globally with Caterpillar right now across their dealer network around the world. A customer, a WestTrac customer, or as a Caterpillar customer, you think of those things as really big machines, but they're actually made up of thousands of small bits. And so it's the small bits that we deal with, right? And so a Caterpillar customer or a WestTrac customer enters in what part they need. We automatically integrate into, our app automatically integrates into their ordering system, into their warehouse system. The ordering system gets the order placed, goes to their warehouse system, makes sure the stock's available, gets dispatched to the closest location for where that Caterpillar customer is. Sometimes it's on site, a customer on site. the asset gets put into, it's showing little lockers there, but obviously some of them with Caterpillar will be larger lockers, some of them are lock cages. And then the customer is notified. They show up with their QR code, PIN number, go and collect their item anytime they want, and then automatically billed and invoiced or cash collected on that transaction. We call it full chain of custody, meaning that there's no argument for error in between who's got what bit, where and when. And we do this in a retail sense and in this industrial click and collect sense. So that just gives you an example of the type of stuff, one of the use cases that customers use our technology for. Next slide, please. Another one is, we're big in the university sector in the US, but think of it as any large campus. You know, a university in the US, or even Melbourne University for that matter, or Sydney University, they deal with thousands of packages a day. And so we manage the chain of custody and transactions of the whole of the package delivery. You can imagine a bunch of students, particularly in the US, because typically they live on campus, the amount of Amazon deliveries that a typical student is getting on a regular basis. So we have a full integrated system in there that manages on behalf of the university, integrated into the university systems, the whole asset management and chain of custody system for their packages that come on campus. Next slide, please. So we fundamentally are focused on two areas on a global basis. I talked about click and collect from an e-commerce perspective, and we know what COVID's done to that. It's made that market just completely go crazy. Contactless, anything in a contactless way is core to what we do. Once again, COVID has driven that. And the other one, which is also a big part of our business, is the Agile Workplace. And the Agile Workplace, the office is here to stay, but it's really different. And it's really different in the sense that corporate employees, some of them will never go back to the office. Who knows how many, whether it's 10% or 30%. But a vast majority of them will go back to the office 1 day a week, 3 days a week, 3 days a month, whatever the corporation decides is the right thing for that employee. So what's happening is the workplace is changing. It's becoming far more agile. We're seeing large corporations actually shrink their footprint down in size, but throw more technology in the workplace to make it far more, far easier for everyone to manage. And we are part of that. We provide the locker systems inside those offices, and we integrate into the building management system. We integrate into the IT security system, their HR systems, so that the company has control of who can come in, when, where, how, and why. So that market, we're seeing this space move, not just in Australia, but all over the world. It's just a phenomenon that's happening at a huge rate of knots. We just won a contract in London with James Lang in their new corporate head offices in London, magnificent offices. But it's actually a smaller footprint than what they had, but it's full of technology. And we are completely part of that process. Next slide, please. The other thing we announced last quarter was our TZ Cloud, moving all of our premise-based software into a cloud infrastructure. Gives us a whole bunch of benefits, gives our customers a whole bunch of benefits. And we're first quarter in on that. And we're seeing a great take up of existing customers, but also our new customers. Our premise-based solutions are no longer being offered to new customers. It's all cloud-based solution. So we're seeing a great take up of that. And that's much easier for us as a business to manage, and much easier for our customers to manage as well. Next slide, please. I just want to give everyone a quick snapshot of what that means, just to be clear. So we used to sell a perpetual license. It's a one-time deal, one-off. You only get the money once. Now what we're doing is we're offering fixed term licenses in our cloud solution. Customers can either buy a 12-month subscription or a 3-year subscription or a 5-year subscription, which includes all updates, upgrades, support, et cetera, et cetera. So we're managing that transition. Obviously, we recognise that revenue on a monthly basis, whereas on the perpetual license, we would recognise that revenue right up front. So that's a good, an interesting transition and transformation that we're going through as a business right now. Next slide, please. So what we're building is an annuity base to our business. We already, at the end of first quarter of TZ Cloud, we're already at 250K MRR. We've told the market that we're going to share our MRR each month with the market so people can see what that growth rate is looking like. And I expect that to grow substantially and quickly on a quarterly basis. Month to month, it might vary that much, but on a quarterly basis, that revenue will be the fastest growing part of our business. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, 235K is the current run rate from basically a zero start in the beginning of last quarter. So I'm really pleased with that, and we will see that start to ramp up over the coming quarters. Next slide. Having said that, we've got to recognise revenue from a SaaS model on a monthly basis and not up front. That still is not impacting our top line. The bottom side of the graph will show that this is purchase orders in, not revenue recognised, just to be clear. Purchase orders in for the same period last time was $11 million. For the same period this year, we're already at basically $18 million in booked revenue. That's sales purchase orders in. So and I've told this to the market, I can see where we're going to. Last year we did 16 million. So we're already ahead of that, and I think this was dated at the end of January. So we've already got February up our sleeves going into the second half of this financial year. And I see where we will land with purchase orders in somewhere around minimum of 25 million type circa number. Next slide, please. What I've done here is I've shown you the pipeline existing for highly qualified opportunities to June 30 this year. So we're sitting at around $30 million currently of pipeline opportunities. Doesn't mean we're going to win them all, by the way. Previous slide was facts, actuals, purchase orders in. This is pipeline. So we're in really good shape from a front-end sales order intake perspective. We're currently sitting with a backlog of, I think, around $11 million in our backlog. So we're in really good shape. And the reasons that is happening is I'd like to tell you that was my genius and et cetera, but it's the market also doing it. And COVID is fast forwarding our business because of the reasons I explained earlier. Next slide. New market opportunities. How am I going for time, guys?
Probably at time. I'll give you a couple more minutes.
All right, a couple more minutes. I just want to share this. We've just won this purchase order, and it just goes to show where our use cases can really change. We're working with a global fast food chain in the US, and the food delivery service globally is going nuts, right? Whether it's Uber Eats or Menulog or Deliveroo, we're working with a global fast food chain, and we're about to go from testing into real live field trials, which will happen in the next, certainly in the next 3 months. And what it means is that an Uber driver will be able to go into the fast food chain with all the food ordered, arrive at the fast food chain, click, enter in his PIN number or QR code for the order that he has to pick up. The lockers in this case, ones will be refrigerated and heated. He'll collect his Uber parcels out and leave to go and deliver his food to you, assuming he doesn't eat your chips on the way there. But so we're seeing this happening around the world, and it's a new revenue opportunity for us. The back end process of this for the customers for the fast food chains is really broken. I don't know if you've ever been into a fast food chain and you're fighting with the Uber guy who's trying to collect his parcels. So it really will help the productivity of these sort of companies. The next piece we'll add to that is that will connect Google Maps to the service, so that the fast food chain will know if the Uber driver is 12 minutes away, 7 minutes away, 3 minutes away, so they know when to put the food into the particular lockers. Next slide, please. So just closing off, we're well and truly into our transition of a different business model. We're focused on key growth areas, and we're seeing that already. We've got a great backlog, 9 million, it's more than 9 million now from when this slide was done. And we're leveraging our R&D assets to take our technology into the next generation. So that's just a quick snapshot on us. Thanks very much. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Mario. Just a couple of questions here, and we don't have a lot of time, to be honest, but what's the actual intellectual property here, and why can't this kind of be replicated by, you know, one of the big players in the delivery business like Amazon, for example?
Well, there's a multitude of different markets, right? And Amazon, when you're talking retail, like Amazon does, we'll just leave Amazon to do what Amazon does, right? But when it's where we are strong is when we've got to integrate into companies' back-end systems, right? And you've got to take their HR system or their email system or their security systems and deliver us a process for that, a whole workflow for that customer, just like the burger example I gave you. So the short answer is that that's where our intellectual property sits, is in the integration of all those services and the APIs that we have built into our product.
Now, if you do your homework on TZL, it has a long history, and it's probably got a history of, you know, some structural issues and execution issues. So what's the pathway to cash flow? Because if you look at the business model, there's a very high cost level, particularly with management. So can you talk us through the pathway to being cash flow positive? Sure.
I'm not going to excuse the sins of the past. I think there was definitely some serious sins in the past of this business. But what I can tell you is that as we grow our software base, that's where our profitability will come from. And certainly as we create an annuity revenue stream, that's an ongoing revenue stream. And we are in the process of streamlining our supply chain. Once I get that completed, that will also reduce some substantial costs in the business. But the reality is that our software revenue is the fastest growing part of our business. And as that grows, we don't have to scale up people to scale that revenue. So especially the model that we're taking. So I think that is what will drive us to a positive cash business and a profitable business going forward, and a growth business.
Thanks, Mario. That's all we have time for, unfortunately. Have a nice weekend, and we'll get you back on later in the year.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Silk Logistics. I think we welcome back Silk Logistics. ASX code SLH, market cap around 175 million. It doesn't have a one-year return. The company is a leading Australian-owned logistics business, as the name suggests, providing an integrated port-to-door service to some of the world's best-known brands. We have with us, and welcome back, CEO Brendan Boyd. Brendan, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim, and thanks for having us back on. Just to start, perhaps get people to think about, excuse me, the device they're wearing, the clothes, perhaps the coffee they're drinking, and any other sort of physical item that might be around them at the moment. And the common theme amongst all of that is most of that product will arrive in this country by container. If you just go to that next slide for me, Tim, and I'll talk as we go, but put that into context, about 9 million containers of throughput through the 5 major ports in Australia. So container movement is a critical part of our economy here in this country. Then perhaps think about the last 12 months or 2 years, and as my CFO likes to describe it, the confluence of events, or the perfect storm, if you like. Global shipping delays, lockdowns, labour disruptions and strikes at the port, congestion, and then more recently, some of the Omicron absenteeism, which sort of hit record levels over recent months. I then draw your attention to what it is that Silk Logistics Holdings actually does. Despite those challenges, our business is very focused on the physical, which is the movement of containers from the port into our warehouses and then distributed through that last mile. Think about those events over the last 12 months, the constraint on shipping, the delays across supply chains generally, and perhaps as a little fact that may not be well known, but the Melbourne and Sydney ports are in the bottom 15% still in the world for efficiency. So what is it we do? We offer our customers a solution moving freight from wharf through the warehouse to last mile. We do that obviously with a large physical network, thanks Tim, and we overlay that with a very strong technology capability. Our critical point of difference, thanks Tim, if you just move to the next slide, our critical point of difference is our service execution and then utilising our technology overlay to give our customers not just the analytics and the visibility of product moving through their supply chain, but that absolute certainty that Silk will deliver their product within the service promise that we've given them. We aren't a heavy asset business. I have a very strong view that a variably costed asset right business model suits this industry, allows us to flex, it allows us to deal with that volatility that has occurred in the marketplace over the last 2 years, but critically allows us to meet that customer requirement on a DIFOT that is as good as anyone in the industry. And customer centricity is the key to what we're doing with that business model. If we just look at some very quick stats, we will move around 450,000 TEU this year. So of that 9 million containers moving through the 5 main ports, we have lots of room for growth, and certainly that's part of our target in the next 3 to 5 years. Our warehouse footprint is significant, and we move retail products, fast-moving consumer goods, paints, lubricants, food, dairy. So we have a very diverse range of customers in our footprint who you can see vote with their feet, and they stick with us over the long term. I think it's critical for these customers that we've been able to work with them to navigate some of those challenges that they've had in their supply chain. And one of the common themes at the moment, historically, supply chains have had the holy grail of having product or inventory arrive just in time. The last 2 years have flipped that on its head, and we now see customers holding inventory, bringing inventory early, just in case. And that's changed the real dynamic of supply chains, and it's changed forever the absolute requirement for embedded technology that gives our customers greater visibility and greater certainty about the movement of that product through their supply chain. Thanks, Tim. Just quickly, we reported our results for the first half yesterday, only the second time since we listed in July last year. And you can see some great results for the business. Revenue up 18% on the prior calendar period, 7% ahead of our IPO forecast. EBIT at a margin of 6.9%, again, well up on the prior calendar period and some 20% ahead of our prospectus forecast. Our bill container volumes, as you would expect, we're winning market share because of that time certain promise that we're giving our customers. Our warehouse volumes, think about that just in case inventory holding. Customers are holding more, so our warehouse occupancy rates are high. And certainly in our bill consignments, particularly as we start now to provide solutions in the B2C space, we're seeing a really strong growth in our distribution business for that last mile delivery requirement. Overall, for us, a really pleasing half-year result that we were able to deliver to the market yesterday. Thanks, Tim. The balance sheet. I come back to that asset-light model that we've talked to. One of the real features of our business is the cash we are able to generate. Our EBITDA to cash conversion comes through at about 81% for the half, which is a great feature, as I said, of our business model. Underlying EBIT, very strong. Underlying NPAT, strong. And our statutory NPAT there reflecting IPO costs and the tax effect of those. The critical things underpinning that growth, as I've said, we've been able to help our customers navigate those challenges at a time when the market has had unprecedented levels of uncertainty. So that ability to deliver that time certain offer has been critical to what Silk's been able to deliver. New customers. Some people might argue that we've had some favourable tailwinds as an industry. Our customer-facing team have continued to really deliver strong organic growth results, primarily based on that value proposition that we're taking to the market. COVID, like all businesses, has had an impact, particularly in the areas of unplanned absenteeism. Some of you may be familiar, we had some unwanted press late last year in terms of Pizzagate in New South Wales, where we were accused of promoting an unsafe work environment. That wasn't the case. We've managed COVID, I think, in our business as well as any, and our unplanned absenteeism spiked at 8% when others in our industry were running at 20 and 25. And I think, again, that's a feature of the culture and what we've been able to work with our people in terms of the Silk way of doing things. Thanks, Tim. As we look to the future, we've delivered an upgrade to our forecast for the half. There is no doubt there's a degree of uncertainty, not least with what's going on in Europe in the last couple of days. That aside, there's no doubt inflation is upon us and the interest rate rises are looming. That won't directly affect our business, but what it will do is perhaps dampen some of that consumer demand, particularly in the discretionary spend. Wages pressures, we've been able to negotiate EAs in the last 12 months in the mid 2% range. Our next round are already looking at 3.5% to 4%, and that goes hand in hand with those inflation aspects that we've talked to. Touched on Europe and what impact that might have is still to play out, I think, as our friend Mr. Putin works through what he's going to do. But domestically, change of government, be that federally or here in Melbourne, either of those could have significant impacts on what we think consumer sentiment might be. That doesn't affect us directly, but certainly some of our larger retail customers are citing a degree of uncertainty as they look out into the remainder of FY22 and beyond. There's no doubt industrial property continues to be very tightly held. Occupancy rates in that space are at an all-time high, and we think that's one of the challenges given our high utilisation rate that we need to deal with over the next 6 to 12 months. From an opportunity perspective, we've delivered some really strong growth, but the industry remains highly fragmented. 400,000 containers, we move out of 9 million in the 5 major ports. It gives you some insight into the volume that is not under our control. Similarly, in our warehousing and distribution businesses, there is significant upside for our business to grow. And what will underpin that, what will be critical, is the tool set that we bring to the table for our customers, our control tower platform, which provides them that visibility, that analytic capability, and that certainty that now, more than ever with COVID, is just critical to their operations. Beyond that, we are seeking to expand the business from a geographic perspective. We have customer demand in New Zealand. We have customer demand for additional services in Perth and Adelaide. So we are certainly looking at that as opportunity as we go forward. Thanks, Tim. Just quickly, we've upgraded our forecast for the full year, well ahead of our prospectus that was released in July. And I've talked through some of those opportunities. Probably the critical call out here, our industry, not on its own, but resource, labour, it is becoming harder and harder to attract people and retain them. And indeed, there's a real war, a bidding war almost, for people in the market at the moment. So that's something that we think we're going to need to really focus our attention on through our employee value proposition in this coming calendar period. Thank you, Tim. I think we're up to the last slide.
We are, thank you. Yeah, we've got time. Just when you're talking about the perception that you've had some favourable tailwinds, given all the supply chain disruptions, has that actually played into your hands, or has that made things more difficult? I know you've mentioned employees and things like that.
Yeah, look, I think there's certainly been periods of increased volume, but I think the biggest challenge, and people see volume as a great thing, but what's really happened, Tim, particularly in the last 18 months, that volume has come at such a volatile rate that planning and resource management has been absolutely challenged. And there's been weeks in Brisbane, for example, where you don't have a ship arrive in the port, and you've got resource and infrastructure there ready to go. So, my view is COVID has not necessarily been that favourable for the industry, and some of those challenges are very real in terms of that volatility coming through the network.
And when you talk about absenteeism, in relation to COVID, there's a question here. Classically, frontline turnover rates in logistics industries are quite high. So how are you going about mitigating this risk for your business?
Yeah, let me give 2 quick stats. Typically, our unplanned absenteeism, which is a critical measure in the business, has historically run at sort of 1.3 to 1.5%. Particularly in this last period of COVID, we've been running at just over 8%. So that's quite significant. Our turnover rate, historically less than 1%. The last 2 months, we're at 2.5% and 3%. So, the Great Resignation, people questioning what they want to do. There's certainly an element of that coming through, I think, not just in our industry, but more broadly. And that's why I said we're really focusing on our employee value proposition, in particular our reward and recognition programs, to keep our people who, let's be frank, have worked longer hours and more effort than ever. So trying to keep them motivated and rewarded is a critical part of what we're doing today.
And just competitors, can you talk through who the competitors are? You wouldn't have too many competitors, I'd imagine.
Look, we sit, we think, in a somewhat unique space in terms of that integrated, technology-enabled end-to-end offer. If you think about then the segments, ACFS and Cube are the 2 major players in that port logistics space. They do some warehousing, typically not too sophisticated. Toll, Linfox, DHL in the warehousing space, and in that distribution space, there's the majors, Toll, Star Trek, TNT, FedEx. There's too many to name, but there are large competitors in each. I think the critical thing, Tim, is no one player holds more than about 4.5% of the market.
And so moving forward, you're in a strong cash position. Are more acquisitions likely?
Yeah, look, certainly we plan to be active. We will always be disciplined and very focused on the synergies and the strategic fit of an acquisition. But certainly, we're looking to expand our port logistics capability in Adelaide and Perth, as well as scaling up in Sydney, where we think we're underweight. And then we have, as I said, strong demand from customers to establish a presence in New Zealand. So we're looking to do something in that space via acquisition rather than a startup.
And should investors, and I'm not asking for financial advice here, but should investors consider this an infrastructure play? I mean, there's an attractive dividend yield there, but there's obviously a degree of consolidation that can also take place to give a sort of growth profile as well. How should investors consider this company in terms of where it's positioned?
Look, it's not an infrastructure play per se. We don't own a lot of assets. This is a technology-enabled services business that operates in a highly fragmented market. Revenues, nudging 400 for the full year. We think we've got a great opportunity to get that, and I've challenged the team on our aspiration, which is $1 billion revenue, $1 billion market cap. And certainly that's our internal motivation, and we're strategizing that aspiration as we speak.
Thanks, Brendan. That's all we have time for. Love to get you back on later in the year and follow that market cap on its road to $1 billion. Good luck out there.
Appreciate the time, Tim. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Botanics Pharmaceuticals, ASX code BOT, market cap around 52 million. We have with us Executive Director, Matt Callahan. The company is a clinical stage dermatology company developing treatments for common skin diseases and infection. Matt, thank you for your time. We know you're in the US. Over to you.
Thanks, Tim, and thanks everyone for the opportunity to present today. We mentioned weather at the start of the session today. It actually snowed. We had sleet today, so quite a different weather setup here. But what I want to talk to you today about is Botanics Pharmaceuticals. We're ASX listed. The code is BOT, as was mentioned. We're focused on the development of a range of novel dermatology products, so products that treat the skin. I'm based here in the Philadelphia area, been in the US for about 10 years. My background very quickly has been in developing products through the FDA approval process. We've taken 5 products through FDA approval and launched them in both the US and different markets around the world. And as we'll kind of see in the presentation today, we're addressing very interesting markets where they have a lot of unmet needs, despite the fact that we kind of have many of these common skin diseases ourselves. And we've got a very mature pipeline. And obviously to have developed that pipeline, we've raised capital from the market over the time. We've been very, a good steward of that. We've got about $17 million in the bank, and that's more than enough to kind of fund the operations that we have planned and the upcoming study. So, Tim, if you just advance the next slide, it's just a summary of the business. Starting at the top, we work in some of the common areas that we all recognize. So many of us have had acne, we have kids that have a dermatitis. Potentially, we've also been exposed to different sorts of bacterial infections over our lives. When you go and see a dermatologist, the first line therapy that they often prescribe is something that is a cream or a gel. Why? Because they're often safer than tablets and injectables, and the patient much prefers those creams and gels to injections and other forms of delivery. We do have a unique technology to deliver drug into the skin that I'm not going to spend any time on today, but you can kind of hit our website for that. And that allows us to deliver these drugs in a much more elegant fashion and to drive a lot of drug into the skin where it's required. I'll talk a little bit about some of the markets that we're targeting, but really one of the surprising things is there actually haven't been any new products approved with a new mechanism of action in both acne and rosacea for more than 25 years. And that's pretty surprising, because for most of the therapeutic areas that you can think of, things like cancer and pain, there's kind of products that are approved on a yearly, or a bi-yearly basis. So there's a lot of unmet needs and lots of opportunities, and that's why we're playing in those areas. In addition to myself, our team is largely US-based. Our president and executive chairman is a guy by the name of Vince Ippolito. His most recent company, Anacor, where he was the head of commercial there, they sold that to Pfizer for $5 billion. And his company before that, they sold Medicis to Valiant for about $2.2 billion. And the team here is very experienced in this pharma space, particularly with taking dermatology products through to patients, but also transacting companies as well. As we'll see from the pipeline in just a minute, we've got a number of things that are happening, particularly within the next 6 to 9 months. So a number of clinical studies that we started last year are coming to their conclusion. And in the pharmaceutical world, they're very big value inflection points. We kind of gain our value through delivering data and progressing products towards FDA approval and ultimately generating revenue. And we'll talk a little bit about some of those opportunities in just a moment. Thanks, Tim. So looking just very quickly at our pipeline. So we divide our pipeline up into 2 different categories. In the purple there are our bacterial-focused products dealing with infection, and in the orange are our dermatology projects. And you'll see from the purple at the top, we announced positive data from a phase 2 study that we ran just last year, and we're actually just about to start another human study targeting infections in humans, particularly with at-risk immune systems who are undergoing hemodialysis. And I'll spend some time talking about that particular application. The other study that we have very far advanced and is almost completed enrollment is in the treatment of rosacea. I'll take you through some of the study outlines for that. That's going to finish its enrollment in the middle of this year. And then we also have a acne study that we're planning to take into phase 3 off the back of phase 2 that we ran across the US and Australia. And I won't be focusing on that today. Coming up within the next month or so, we will be announcing data from a dermatitis study that we've been running in canines in Australia. And kind of the common theme or the underlying drug behind all of these products is based on what is a natural product called CBD or cannabidiol. And I'll talk a little bit about that drug in just a moment and kind of why we think it's really appropriate for dermatology applications. And really the final thing for us on this slide is we have a number of other opportunities in the dermatology space that we're beginning to explore. As we'll see from the market opportunity in a moment, these are really significant markets which have not a lot of new innovation in them. And so as a result, if you can find something that's kind of well proven is safe and you can take that through clinical development reasonably quickly, there's good revenue opportunities to be had there. And then obviously to continue that pipeline is really one of our focuses over the coming year. So Tim, if you wouldn't mind advancing to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about the market opportunity for some of these products. And I should point out that we're focused on developing products that you would get from a physician. So these are not things that you would go into a chemist and buy over the counter. These are things that are prescribed by a doctor. They're kind of prescription strength. And in many cases, they're dealing with the moderate to severe end of these diseases. And kind of what might surprise you from some of the figures here, particularly say with atopic dermatitis, is every year there's about $17 billion of sales of these sorts of products. Now they range, of course, from the kind of the topical creams through to some of the injectable monoclonal antibodies, but it gives you an idea of the patient population in the US alone of about 75 million patients who have atopic dermatitis. With acne, it's a significant market as well, about 50 million patients and about $5 billion in sales. And as I mentioned before, in both rosacea and acne, there's been nothing new approved in about 25 years. So all we've seen approved are kind of new formulations of old drugs. And so as a result, dermatologists are drastically looking for new products to treat patients with often because some of those existing products have pretty significant side effects. If we advance to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about the drug that we're working with. Many of you may be familiar with CBD or cannabidiol. So originally this chemical was identified in the cannabis plant. We use a fully synthetic version of this drug because it is a drug. It's something that has an effect on a disease. And one of the very interesting things about CBD, particularly in the dermatology space, is that it's very safe. And in dermatology, it's kind of the reverse of many therapeutic areas where unless the drug is very safe, it won't be prescribed by physicians and in some cases won't be approved by the FDA. Contrast that with something like cancer or an oncology where I'm just about allowed to kill you if I can cure your cancer. Dermatology is not like that. I apply these things to the outside of my skin, often to my face, and so they can't cause redness or burning or stinging or peeling. So CBD is a very safe product, particularly when it's applied to the skin. The other really interesting thing about CBD is that it has both anti-inflammatory properties, it calms down inflammation, but it also has a tremendous impact on bacteria, particularly things like staph or golden staph, MRSA, which cause infections. And if you think about most dermatological diseases, acne, rosacea, and dermatitis, each of those individual indications have both an inflammatory component, you get redness, as well as an infection component. And so this is the first drug that we found which actually does both things. So you don't need two products. And it's that safety and it's that efficacy with multiple mechanisms of action that we think is really exciting. And it's something that's been exciting the US and international dermatology community. And that's why we're developing it in these different indications. So I'm just going to talk about two of our products very quickly over the slide. Thanks, Tim. Starting with rosacea. So if you think of rosacea, you think of redness of the cheeks, you think of flushing, you kind of think of the English drunk with a big nose. And so that redness or flushing is caused by inflammation in the skin. And we're dealing with a particular type of rosacea, which is called papular-pustular rosacea. And it's really something that has acne-like lesions. These acne-like lesions break out, the redness comes, it's triggered by a range of different things. That could be environmental, that could be things like depression. And these particular lesions stay around, they can often cause scarring. And because they exist on your face, often in women over the age of 35, they can be very embarrassing and very intrusive. And so what we're looking to do here is to see whether our drug, which we call VTX 1702 that contains CBD, can have an effect on reducing these lesions and reducing the redness. So we actually kicked off a phase 1b/2 study, that's an efficacy study in Australia and New Zealand in the middle of last year. We're enrolling patients across about 15 different dermatology sites in New Zealand and Australia, recruiting patients who have moderate to severe papular-pustular rosacea. We treat them for about 8 weeks and we assess on a validated scale the extent to which we've been able to reduce their rosacea and the lesions that are associated with that. We do that against a placebo or a vehicle, they call it, so a cream without the drug in it. When we're actually testing 2 different doses in this study. So for us, the readout of this study, we should have it fully enrolled in the middle of this year with data shortly thereafter. This will give us information to basically show that the drug works really well in rosacea. We've already kind of shown that in acne already, and it'll show us how to design our pivotal studies to get FDA approval in what, as we've seen, is a very significant market without any new drugs in a very long period of time. So that's an example of one of our dermatology products. It kind of forms the basis for that combination of the anti-inflammatory effect and the antibacterial effect as well. So I'll switch gears and talk a little bit about our antimicrobial platform on the next slide. Thanks, Tim. So I mentioned when I was talking about CBD that it is a very good antibiotic. It acts in a different way to many of the antibiotics that we have in the market today. but it's very effective at killing staph and golden staph or MRSA. And so in looking at that property, we could apply that in many different ways. So we could kind of kill bacteria on the surface of the skin, things like school sores, or even things like diabetic wounds. But we've chosen to focus our first product applications in patients who are undergoing hemodialysis. So hemodialysis patients have to go in every week, 2 or 3 times a week, to hook themselves up to a machine that cleans their blood because they're no longer able to do that. Because they're sitting in a chair, often in a strip mall in America with 7 or 8 other people undergoing that therapy. The way that the blood is cleaned is they have a catheter implanted in the middle of their chest. It's a big tube. The blood comes out of there, obviously, through the machine, gets cleaned up and goes back in. Unfortunately, if bacteria get into that tube, the tube is right next to the heart. And so that bacteria becomes no longer an external problem, but an internal bloodstream infection. And so what we're looking to do here is to actually remove the bacteria on the surface of the skin, and particularly in the nose of the patient, because about 1 in 3 of us just naturally carry staph and MRSA around in our nose every day. And so for a hemodialysis patient, that's particularly risky because 20 to 40% of these patients don't die because they're undergoing hemodialysis. They die of an infection. So we've already done a study that we completed last year. As we mentioned, we treated 66 participants, looking to see whether over a very short period of time, about 5 days, we could actually eradicate all of the bacteria that are in their nose. And then we looked to see whether that eradication lasted for about another 3 weeks without any further treatment. And the good news was we were able to eradicate about 76% of patients' MRSA and staph in their nose. And that was very effective at killing those bacteria, and gives us confidence, obviously, going into this next study, that we're going to have a similar effect on these subjects who are subject to hemodialysis. So just to, Tim, if you wouldn't mind just advancing to the next slide, just a quick summary of kind of where we are and what's coming up from a milestone perspective in the next 6 to 9 months. So I mentioned the positive data that we just generated in our antimicrobial study. We're actually going to start another human study that'll kick off at the end of this quarter. And that will be a study that we run in Australia and New Zealand as well, looking over a 9-week period that we can remove these bacteria from subjects' noses who ultimately will be undergoing hemodialysis. Our rosacea studies you see there from the second bullet point will be fully enrolled by the middle of this year. We'll have data as soon thereafter as we can supply it. Very excited to deliver a new therapy into that area where there's been nothing in about 25 years. The acne study will follow our rosacea study. We're looking for some of those data from our rosacea study to inform the design of that. And then finally, our dermatitis study, which is our canine study, we should have enrolment completed by the end of this quarter and data very shortly thereafter in the second quarter of this year. So a number of clinical milestones. Final kind of point from me here, there are a number of other pipeline opportunities out there in the dermatology space, which are really interesting. We're at a time in the life cycle of dermatology companies where a lot of small to medium companies have been bought up. And so there are a number of product opportunities that we're looking at the moment, which we think are really attractive, that can potentially accelerate our commercialization pathway and kind of get to revenue a lot quicker than we otherwise would with the pipeline that we have at the moment. So a lot of news coming through, very excited about the opportunities and really addressing big markets with really novel products. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Matt. Really good presentation, really interesting. So I've got a house here of pimply teenagers, but why has there been such little innovation with regards to the treatment of acne and rosacea, given it's such a common problem?
Yeah, it's probably not through lack of trying. So there's been a number of companies trying to develop products in the acne space. And as I mentioned in the presentation, one of the key requirements to be successful is that the product is safe. So if you think about your kids, and I've had kids with the same problem, if you go to the dermatologist with acne, they'll give you an antibiotic. Often they'll give you an anti-inflammatory in a tube. If they have very serious acne, they'll get put on Accutane or Roaccutane, or isotretinoin. And if you read the label, the label comes with things like suicide risks, cancer risks, obviously that it's sun sensitive. And so you have to look out for all of those things. So that drug probably wouldn't be approved today because it has such serious side effects versus its benefits. Really, the interesting thing about CBD or cannabidiol in our products is that they kill bacteria, they have an effect on inflammation, but they don't have that side effect. So they don't have any really serious side effects that we found at all. And so we think addressing that really significant market with something that's obviously safe, but has those dual actions is a really good opportunity. And as I said, in more than 25 years, we haven't had anything new, and we think it's time for something new.
And just a technical question, why use a synthetic CBD?
Yeah, so we don't actually extract anything from the cannabis plant. We kind of don't squeeze it and then try and isolate the chemicals. You can do that. It's very expensive to do that, and you don't ultimately end up with a clean product. So we actually just make this chemical in a chemical plant, just like every other drug that we would take. The reason to do that is it's much cheaper, it's much more scalable, and you get 100% pure drug every time. And when it comes to drugs, the FDA is very, very keen to see you use a synthetic product rather than a botanical extract.
And just another question here. So antimicrobial resistance is a big problem in the world today. So are you worried about bacteria forming resistance to CBD?
Yeah, it's a great question. And one of the most exciting things I didn't mention on the way through the presentation is that we've already done studies to show that CBD kills bacteria very quickly, within about 6 or 7 minutes. It kills them in about 5 different ways rather than sort of one way that most antibiotics do. And those bacteria don't have time to form resistance to CBD. So we've done these tests over about 20 days compared to common drugs like daptomycin. And you'll see that over that period of time, the amount of CBD required to kill bugs remains the same, basically. Whereas with most of the antibiotics that we have today, you need 3, 5, 10, 15, 20 times more drug to kill the bacteria. So that's pretty exciting, particularly if we're going to use this in common diseases, things like acne, rosacea, where there's lots of patients. We don't want to create antimicrobial resistance, and the early signs are that we're not doing that with this drug. And that's pretty exciting to be able to use an antibiotic that ultimately isn't going to create downstream problems.
Now there's a question here. Can you explain the failure of the acne study in the US arm of the trial last year, a problem with the placebo?
Yeah, so one of the studies that we did a bit more than a year ago, actually, it was about 2 years ago, was a study we ran across Australia and the US in acne. And if you look at the data that we generated, the data from Australia was statistically significant and showed a great effect over the placebo or the vehicle. The study that we ran in the US didn't have that separation. So we had some manufacturing issues with that study where we actually had to manufacture in 2 different places because CBD up until about a year ago was actually a controlled substance because it originally was found in the cannabis plant. And so what we've done over the last couple of years is actually improve the manufacturing processes that we've had. We've been able to show that success in our 1801 study last year with highly statistically significant separation from vehicle. And that's just been a learning process for us as we've gone through the development program and something that we've implemented for all of our later stage studies. So it's obviously something that we didn't want to have happen at the time, but we've been able to move on from that and show success in subsequent studies. And I think we're on the right track with that.
And overall, the biotech sector's been smashed recently. We're seeing it across the board. You're in a really strong position. The company's in a strong position in terms of having cash on hand. Are you looking to expand that product pipeline, particularly given the FDA always seems to, at times, fast track unmet need trials? So is the focus on expanding the product line as well as your existing clinical milestones?
Yeah, it is, and certainly, having $17 million in the bank when the market's melting down is probably a good place to be, and that's really just a function of what's happened in the US in biotech. It's not really a reflection on the underlying kind of fundamentals of the sector, unfortunately. But yes, to answer your question, we are actively looking for other pipeline opportunities. I mentioned a couple of our personnel at the start. So Vince Ippolito, who's our president and executive chairman, he sold companies for billions of dollars in the dermatology space. So he's a very commercial animal. he's kind of, in some respects, sitting on the bench, raring to go to kind of commercialize and sell products. And so what we're looking to do is kind of put some products in his hands a bit earlier than our pipeline opportunities, to allow him to go out there and start to do deals and create revenue. So we're pretty excited about some of the things that we're looking at the moment. Kind of stay tuned for news on that as we move through the next couple of quarters. But really our goal is to kind of accelerate our growth into a medium-sized dermatology company that's revenue producing as quickly as possible, and kind of add value to these earlier pipeline products as well.
And typically those discussions involve a discussion with big pharma. Is that the sort of distribution partner you're looking for?
Yeah, it's probably more looking for products that we think a medium-sized derm company can make money off itself. So, in the short term, in the longer term, our pipeline is attractive to large pharmaceutical companies. I think in the medium term, there's an opportunity for us to generate revenue directly. Dermatology is one of those areas where small companies can actually play in the US. So there's a lot, there's probably 5,000 dermatologists. And so you can put a sales force, 30, 40 people in the field to actually address that market. You wouldn't hope to do that in kind of a pain area, as an example, with more than 100,000 GPs. It doesn't make sense. So derm's a wonderful area because the dermatologists are very informed. They're looking for new products. They're trying to help patients. And so having a direct relationship with them with novel products is a really good opportunity to generate revenue and value, and ultimately make yourself a target for those bigger companies.
And just to finish, the share price has struggled. You've got a lot of believers here. Botanic seems so promising. So can you explain the kind of disconnect between the vision and where the share price is trading?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly one of the most puzzling things that we had from last year is we announced very positive data from an antimicrobial study, and our share price went down. Usually it goes up when you deliver all the good things that you should. So I think really what the market's looking for is some of these studies to deliver data. And the good news about that was we're on the cusp of delivering data from 3 different clinical programs over the next little bit. There is certainly a downturn in the biotech sector in the US. It's off more than 30% in the last couple of months, and certainly the last quarter. But I think, as we kind of tell our story, we do have a very significantly valued pipeline. And as we start to deliver on these data milestones, and as we start to get some of these pipeline opportunities in front of investors, I think we're going to see significant growth, back into the 20-25 cent where we were when we were running these studies about 2 years ago.
Great, Matt. That's all we have time for. Really interesting story. Thanks for telling that story, and love to have you back on in the year.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. That's all we have time for. A wet weekend ahead of us, maybe not for those in Melbourne. See you next week.